G'day folks, welcome to another episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod Moore here from the Learn to Paint Academy with you again. I'm excited about our little project here today. We're going to do a subject which is just down the road from me. It's a beautiful beach called Sunshine Beach here on the Sunshine Coast, just around the corner from Noosa. And it is one of those beautiful parts of the world. When I first moved up here to the Sunshine Coast, Sue and I lived at the beach there and we walked up and down this beach every morning. So I thought it'd be great to have a go at painting it. Here's the subject itself. And as you can see, it's quite a grayed off scene, this particular one. So we'll explore that using our acrylics here today. How do we get that sort of grayed off feel? We won't put all the people in. You can put people in if you want. What I'm going to really focus in on is just getting the main shapes in with the right saturation, the right value and so on. So I'll explore that as our primary interest in painting this one here today. And if you want, you can add the people in yourself, you know, when you have a go at it. But it's a great little subject. We'll modify the sky around a little bit, so we're not going to do it quite as moody as that. Now, as always, with the Learn to Paint TV, we're going to use the Moore method of painting, which is what we teach at the Learn to Paint Academy, which is basically 3 brushes, 3 colors, and 3 steps to follow. So if you haven't checked it out, make sure you go and register for our free course at the Learn to Paint Academy and you can learn more about that method. We've taught 30,000 people around the world so far how to get started painting with the Moore method of painting. So just coming down to our palette. Our basic palette is our French ultramarine blue. Now I'm using acrylics here today, okay, and I've got a stay wet palette that I've set up. If you don't know how to set up your own stay wet palette, this is a really cheap, affordable solution for doing so. Check out our video, which is one of our Art Studio Chats videos. You'll find it at the Learn to Paint online blog. So getting back to our colors, French ultramarine blue, permanent alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow light as a booster color, and of course our titanium white. I've got a bucket of water here, and the brushes we're going to use is going to be, we basically use 3 brushes, but essentially they're a flat brush, right, with hog hair bristle brushes. Now sometimes they don't go too well in the water, they get a bit crusty, but that's okay. I don't mind them being a little bit crusty because it adds to some texture and interest and so on. So I've got 3 big flat brushes, I've got 3 medium-sized ones. That'll do most of our painting here today. Why do I have 3 of each size? Because I want one for my darks, one for my lights and so on. And that way I don't have to stop and wash my brush all the time. But if you've only got 1 of each size, that's perfectly fine as well. I'll pop all those there. And as I said, I'm using the Stay Wet palette. And you can check out learntopaint.online for details on how to create your own Stay Wet palette. All right, we're going to be painting on a 9 by 11 inch canvas panel here today. This is just going to be a demo, so it won't be a finished painting, but if you want to do a complete finished painting, be my guest. And let us get underway. All right, step 1 of the Moore method of painting is to get our little drawing in. So I have got myself a tiny little flat brush and a bucket of water here, which I'll swish the water around, and we will mix up a little dark. Now, if you haven't taken our free introductory Learn to Paint introduction course at the Learn to Paint Academy, I highly recommend it because I go into everything we're going to do in this demo here today. I go into it in a lot more detail. And it's a free course, and we give you 4 complete painting demonstrations as well. So I highly recommend it. Just go to learntopaint.info and you can register there. All right, so I'm just mixing up a little dark tone here, and we come over to our canvas, and the horizon line in this painting, in this subject, it's not halfway, it's lower than halfway. I deliberately took the photo so that it would be lower than halfway. It's going to run around about there, and the headland runs out to about 2/3 of the way out. So we'll pop that there, and then it's quite low down for part of it, like so, and then it rises up and dips over there. Okay, around about there. And then you've got the rest of the water out here, like so, and then this is water. So I might just lower the water line here. So we'll just bring this sort of more like that so we can get a few waves and things in. But that's basically it as far as a drawing goes, and this is why the Moore method of painting has been so helpful for so many people, is that they get stuck with how to get a good accurate drawing rendered. Well, what we do is reduce it down to big shapes. So we've got this headland here, right, which is basically shape number 1. Then we've got this sand area, that's shape number 2. We've got the water, which is really from there through to around about here, that's shape 3. Sky becomes shape 4. If you want to put clouds in, you could make those shape 5 if you want to. I'm going to do a just a sort of a whimsical sort of sky here today. I won't be, trying to render clouds with this one. So that means we've got 4 big shapes. Now, how easy is that, folks? We've only got 4 big shapes here that we need to deal with in this painting. And when you get the ability to be able to see a subject and break it down into its, major shapes like that, and chunk information together, it just makes the starting point for your painting so much easier. So, this is what we teach at the Learn to Paint Academy, simplification. And if you're a beginner to intermediate artist, simplification really is the key to helping you improve. So we're now going to go on to step number 2 of the Moore method of painting, which is, of course, our blocking step. So I am going to take a fairly crusty old flat brush. You can see I've had to tape it up and everything. It's been well used, this brush. A little bit of water, and we're going to get a dark. So we always go for our darkest darks first. And our darkest dark is going to be our French ultramarine blue, a little bit of that alizarin crimson, little pinhead of the yellow ochre in there, just to grey it back a bit. Okay, and we want to, when we do our blocking, we want the paint to be fairly loose. We don't want it to be too thick. This applies whether we're using acrylics or oils or water mixable oils. We still want to have our blocking stage. We want that paint to be fairly loose. Okay, we come up onto the canvas here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to block in one sort of dark tone, which is trying to just establish the overall value of this shape. Okay, and then we're not going to worry about details right now. And you notice I'm a little bit on the cool side with it. Okay, because when you look at the photo, it is more cool than warm. But we can put some warm notes in it as we go. Okay, so we block in that big shape and we're off to a good start. Next thing I would then do is probably the water. So the water is going to be different, so I'll just give the brush a little bit of a swish out in my bucket of clean water here. Notice I've still got a little bit of residue of that colour. Because we're using a limited palette, I can get away with that. So now we'll take some of this blue, we'll take some of this yellow, so we're going to move it towards a green tone, because it sort of is a bluey green if you look closely at the water. Okay, a bluey green, and then we'll lighten it back with the white. Now the problem is when you lighten it back with the white, of course, is it tends to grey it and cool it a little bit too much. So then you've got to add a little bit more pigment in and just play around with it until you get just that right tone. So it needs to be a light value. It's got to be a lot lighter than, I'll add a touch of the cadmium yellow light, because that will help me to keep it on the green side but also have a light value. It's got to be a lot lighter than what we just blocked in here. Okay, so let's just test this, and that's roughly right. It is a fairly grayed off scene here that we're painting. There's a lot of white foam in there. Don't worry about the white foam just yet. Just get a basic color in for the body of water, and then we can put all that white foam over the top of that, and we'll use a palette knife to do that just to get some interesting effects, right? So just establish a nice little shape. I'll push a little bit of it slightly bluer. Okay, so I'll get a little bit more blue, mix it on the edge, get a bit more white into that. So we have a bluier mix, and that bluier mix I'll just add into this section in here where the water, where the waves have come up onto the sand and then they've receded and they've left a little bit of a reflection of the sky there. Okay, good. So we'll pop that brush to one side, and then we'll come in and get a sandy color. So I'll just use another large brush here for this. So I want to try and keep the colour a little bit on the clean side. So that brush has got blues and reds in it, which we don't really want for this next step. So we'll take some of this yellow ochre, we'll take some of this clean white. Okay, we'll mix that together. And we want to create a bit of a gradient in this tone here. So I'll go fairly light initially. Okay, something like that. Perhaps just a tiniest little pinhead of the red in there and a tiniest little pinhead of the blue. See how much of a pinhead I've got there? Can you see that? It's very, very tiny, right? And why am I putting a little pinhead of the red and the blue in there? Because I want to grey the colour off just slightly. Because I'm going to paint the distant part of it first, right? So come up back up to the canvas here, and the further away it is, the more greyed off it's going to be. So I'll just pop that in. And remember, at this stage, we're just blocking in colour. We're not trying to create finished elements here, right? And because I'm using a big brush, I can get some nice textural shapes into that sand. Because sand, you know, can be just like a bit blocky sometimes if you're not careful. So using a big brush and getting some interesting brush marks in there definitely helps. Now notice I'm darkening it. I'm going to add a little pinhead of the red in there to warm it. Okay, see how that's darker and warmer than this mix here, because warm, darker values come forward. Okay, and we want to create a sense of depth in this painting, so we want to have that effect. Okay, in fact, what we could do is just even darken it up a little bit more. Well, it's warmed it up. I'll get a little bit more of that yellow ochre in there. Okay, and then we can just put in some accents of darks just in the foreground. Don't let that run up too far up into the painting. If you have a close look at the photo there, you'll see that right in the foreground there's some dark marks in the sand and so on. So you want to just represent those. Don't try and paint them exactly as they are. Just try and get a little bit of a representation of those. Okay. Now, one thing that's bugging me is that I haven't put that up high enough just there, but because that's my lighter mix and I've currently got my dark mix in there, what I'm going to have to do is grab some paper towel. Okay, and I'll just pull some of that paint out of the brush and then come back into this lighter mix. So see why I always leave the previous mix available rather than mixing completely into my colour. Always leave what I had there previously. Okay, and then I can come back up and I can just raise that horizon line, or it's not really a horizon line, but that bottom of that of the hillside there. Okay, there's a little bit of that darker tone showing through there, and that's perfectly fine. It'll just create a little bit of interest. All right, we're going well, right? So I'll give that brush a little bit of clean. We've got most of it blocked in at this stage, which is good. So today we're doing this in a simplistic way that anybody can have a go at. Any beginner can do this painting here today, right? So now we're going to take all this white, I'm going to pop it there. Okay, I'm going to get some blue, but it's predominantly blue, and mix the blue to one side here. Okay, get a little bit more of that blue. I'll pick up a little bit of this orangey tone here, and we'll just pop it there, but I'll get a little bit of that into this blue. And that'll just help keep it grey, on the grey side, right? Rather than being happy, happy blue out of the tube. Nothing wrong with happy, happy blue. But in this particular painting that we're doing, the colours are greyed off. They're quite muted, right? So there is our sort of sky colour. Now what I'm going to do, I'll get a little bit less water in this mix now, because I don't like having to work back into my skies too much if I can help it. But see that's a nice grey light tone by comparison with the headland there. Okay, and that's important. Now with this white, we'll now mix it down into the blue, but we'll now pick up more of this orange. Okay, we'll mix that together, and that should give us a sort of a warmish grey. Okay, and let's just bring some of that in here. And as I said, I'm not going to even try and paint clouds in this. I'm just going to use big, broad brush marks just to represent some interesting tones and shifts in tone. Well, that's a bit too much red, right? That was a mistake. Let me pick up some of this and see if we can't. No, I think I'll have to give my brush a clean. That's what happens when you talk and paint at the same time. Sometimes it can cause a few problems. There we go. There's a bit of a mix there. So we'll get some blue into that. We'll get some tiny little bit of red this time into that. Touch more of the yellow ochre. Okay. See, as I add those colours, it pushes it warm. We don't want it too warm, so we'll add more blue to nullify it. Okay. See how it's not as warm now? It's starting to push it back to a grey. So knowing how to mix colours, you know, is really important skill as you're learning to paint. And it's a bit like a plumber not knowing how to use a wrench. If you're trying to learn to paint and you don't have the basic skills of colour mixing, then I highly recommend that you go and learn all about colour mixing and values and saturation, because these are the fundamental building blocks of painting, you know, good painting. Difficult to become a good artist without them. That's not to say you can't, but it certainly helps knowing the basics, right? Get some more of that blue, maybe just push it a little bit stronger. So if you need to learn those basic skills, then at the Learn to Paint Academy we have our colour mixing course, which I highly recommend. You should be able to mix colours without thinking about them. That's the goal we want to get you to, where it just becomes this unconscious process that you go through. Now, if I wasn't talking, I wouldn't have to think about the colours. I'd just be automatically mixing them and just intuitively knowing, do I need to push it warmer? Do I need to push it cooler? Is the value right? It all becomes just intuitive after a while, but you need to get the basic knowledge first and then practice it. Okay. Now, if I fuzz up that line of the headland there, that's okay, because in step 3 we're going to strengthen that right up. Now notice I've got a few different colours and shifts in tone and atmosphere and so on. It's pretty subtle at the moment, so I think I might just push some colour a little bit more before we finish off this section. Okay, so let's get some darker blue into here. Pick up a little bit of that pink just to grey it. Just to get a little bit, tiny little bit more strength in that blue section of the sky there. Now again, because we're using limited palette, this will all just tie in nicely with everything else that's going on in the painting. Try and get a little bit of a darker grey, so I'll pick up some of that original dark that we had there. And of course, by putting that in, it's going to then harmonise with the dark in the hillside there. And try and keep it random. Now you need to do this fairly quickly, because that paint's drying up there fairly quickly. You could use a retarder if you want. Up to you. I tend not to. Sometimes it might be a bad idea as the weather warms up here. Now to soften out some of those edges there. I'll just put the brush in a little bit of water just to help with the softening. And now we've got some moody sort of atmosphere in the sky, a little bit cloud-like, without really painting clouds. Now you can paint, go to the trouble of painting clouds if you want, that's perfectly fine. But what I'm trying to show you is how to create more atmosphere and mood in a painting rather than literally representing it. So we're going to try and keep our painting nice and loose and making a statement for sure about the subject, but making that subject, that statement to be one that's a little bit looser and more abstract. Okay, and again, I'll just give that brush a clean with it, and then with a little touch of water, I'll just soften out some parts of that. Just so we don't have hard edges in those clouds there. One or two is okay, but always better to soften it back. And I think that's working pretty fine now, so I'm happy with that. So that really concludes our blocking. Well, there you go, folks. That's the end of step 2, our blocking. I'm really happy with the way this one's going. Remember to keep your colors subtle, because this is quite a grayed off, and sort of the colors are almost pastel. They're a gray pastel color. So keep them light and subtle like that. Clearly the headland is our darkest dark, right? And then our sky up in here is our lightest light, and our foam will be as well. So what I really want to draw your attention to is we do have one big shape here, right? Then we've got the second big shape's the water, sand's the third big shape, and the sky is the fourth big shape. So it's all about getting the big shapes in the right place on the canvas, and then blocking in the right color and value in there. Okay, that's the real key here. Now, because this is acrylic, I'm going to let this fully dry, half an hour to an hour. I'll come back and then we'll do step 3 of the Moore method of painting. If you're using oils or water mixable oils, you can push on and do step 3 straight away. Just keep watching the video, right? So somebody asked me, is it okay to paint wet on wet? Of course it is, yeah. It's easier for a lot of people, like if you're using water mixable oils, just to take a break at this point, just let the water dry off and let the paint set off a little bit. You'll find it a lot easier. But certainly with acrylics, we want this to be bone dry before we come back in and do step 3. Acrylics are no good when they go tacky. They're difficult to work with. So make sure you take a little break, go and make a cup of tea. I'll see you soon. Cheers. Okay, welcome back, friends. I've let this dry off for about an hour now, and it's dry to the touch, which is good. So we're now going to move into step 3, which is now we're going to start to bring some details in and really bring this painting to life. So just having a look at it there, it's dried off quite nicely. We need to strengthen up the dark in the headland here. And also I've noticed that I've changed the sort of aspect of the sand a little bit too much. I want to bring that sand more along that line there, which is more in keeping with the photo. So in fact, what I'll do is I'll start off with that. Take a big flat brush here, and I'll come back to my sand color. And because I'm using this Stay Wet palette, my original mixes are still there. So this is a great idea. And if you haven't seen the video, you'll find it on learntopaint.online. Just go to the section on the blog section, and you'll find that there is an art studio chat where I walk you through how I've created the Stay Wet palette there using very cheap materials. Rather than buying one, that's designed for that purpose, just make one yourself. Okay, so I'll just add a little bit more sand, just change the aspect of that water. Whoop, that's a bit too much, isn't it? That's okay. We'll fix that up. I'll just take a little bit of that green there now, in fact, and just fix that up in there. I'll cover that with white foam. So, yeah, highly recommend this wet palette. And it's good if you're going to, take a break during the painting of acrylic, like I've done here. So, give it a go making it. It's just some paper towel, baking paper or parchment paper, and a plastic serving tray, all of which costs very little. Okay, that's going to bug me a little bit, so I'll just run that lighter tone into the water there. Okay, so first thing I want to get back to, or the second thing, because I've just done that, is we want to get back to headland. So now, because I want to get a little bit more precise, I'll come down to a medium brush. We'll take some of this blue here, and we want to just get a dark tone to match what we've already got up there. Keep the value the same. Okay, but we'll just now introduce a slight shift in, because it's kind of a bluey grey green, so a little bit more yellow into that. Okay, whereas what I've got done for the blocking there, it's a little bit on the purple side, so I didn't have enough yellows in it. So let's just try that. Okay, now it looks a bit sort of dark and murky, but it's pretty accurate to what's happening on that headland there. So it's sort of in silhouette mostly. So let's just strengthen up that blocking. Get a few of those little sort of nice little tree top bits that are there without overdoing it, right? So just break the line a little there with some trees. And you can see the importance of values there, that we're painting obviously a darker value than what the sky is. And as a result, those little trees pop out. Now this one's a little bit blocking, so I'll take a dry, clean brush. And I'll just soften that back a little bit. Okay. And it sort of tapers into the water there with some rocks. Allow some of that purple to shine through. I don't think you need to eliminate it completely. Okay, so we'll pop that in. And we might put a little bit of rock face in there as well. So we'll get a little bit of yellow and red. Mix those up. Get the right tone there, something like that. And this is going to be way too strong, so maybe I'll mix it into that darker tone. There we go. That's just, you can see how I've gone from that really bright orange to just a warmer version of the dark that we're already painting in here. So there you go. So now you get a little bit of an effect of some rocks and things happening without them jumping off the canvas too much. And then we can perhaps just use some of that just to do some rocks down the bottom, because there are plenty of rocks there. This is a dog-friendly beach, this one, and the dogs all love it, of course, playing on the beach. So I'm just going for a slightly lighter tone, just for a little bit there. And that gives us just a little bit of variety in the headland. Now look, there's not a lot more to do because we got our big shapes right for the most part, and we've just been working through this methodically. There's really not a huge amount more left to do on this painting, because again, we're keeping this really simple. I want this to be a painting that you could look at and go, wow, I could actually do that, because believing you can do it is part of the journey, right? It's when we don't believe we can do it that we stop trying. So I want to show you this in as simple a way as I can. Now I'm just strengthening up that horizon line a little bit there. Okay, there's a little tiny bit of white canvas showing through, very subtle, but I actually don't mind that because, hey, it could be white breaking foam, right? So now we'll come in with our palette knife. Now you could use, more traditional shape. I kind of like this squared off one. I don't know why. Just one I particularly like. So I'll take some white and I'll get just a touch of this sort of bluey grey into that white. Rather than go straight in with our brightest white, just grey it back ever so subtly. This is the bluey grey that we had up in the sky. So by adding that into the white here, it's going to create more of a reflected sky look. Okay. So we've got our little mix there. Now, good practice is with the palette knife, just make sure you pull that paint off the back of the palette knife with a bit of paper towel. So you start with a clean surface, and then come down to your mix and just scrape it through so you get a little bit of a bead like that. If you have too much paint on the back of your palette knife, it's going to end up on the canvas up here, right? So let's just come in here. There's a lot of white foam. I don't know that we need to put all of it in, but we will get a start just through there. And then we change the angle to run along the beach like that. Okay, we create some breaking waves in through here. You can see why I didn't really fuss about the fact that I mucked up that section there, because I knew I was going to cover it anyway with our white foam. Now, I think that probably the interesting thing to note about this is I started with a photo reference, right? And we use that to get the big shapes in and get the right values and tones. But, you know, for details like this, I'm not really going to go in and fuss too much over the photo. So once I get to this step, I now start thinking more about, well, what's going to be right for the actual overall painting. Okay, so I'm just going to mix up a little bit of that green tone here, a little bit of yellow ochre and cadmium yellow in there. Okay. And then just, sometimes the palette knife leaves it a little bit mucky for my liking. Oops, that's probably a bit dark. I need to add some white into that. So I can just come in here and just strengthen up a few bits and pieces in here. So again, that water is very greeny grey. The whole photo is quite greyed off, which I don't mind. I think it actually adds, or it makes for quite a nice sort of soft pastel-y kind of painting. Push it slightly to the bluer side. Not a lot more to do to this. It comes down to a question of, do I bother putting the people in, or do we just leave people out? Perhaps I'll just put a couple of little marks for people just to give you a feel for it. The key is really, they're little silhouettes, most of them. So you're going to want a small brush like this one. I'll come down here and I'll as they get closer to us, of course, they're going to be a little bit bigger. Key is not to do what I've just done there. I've done 2 lots of 2. So obviously that's not probably desirable. Let me just pop a 3rd person in there. And, you know, like I'm just making little marks there, really, aren't I? They're not people, but way off in the distance, you're probably not going to really, having walked up and down this beach many times, you don't really see too many features and details of them. One thing we could probably do is just take a slightly darker, but a little bit on the warm side, tone, and just run in some extra sort of marks. There's some shadows in the sand there. Just to break up the sand a little bit. We could, if we wanted to, put in the surf flags there. Now, I've just picked up the cadmium yellow light, but that's just way too bright. So I'll take some of this tone here, and we'll just tone that back a bit. Okay, and just pop in the yellow, a little touch of the red. Whoop. When you make a mistake like that, don't panic. I've got this tone here, the sand tone. I'll just come back in and we'll just bring that back to a reasonable level like that. There's another little bit of the yellow. It's actually quite challenging talking and painting, doing these demos, because I'm standing very much to one side rather than straight on. I do not recommend trying to paint that way. Okay, we'll get a little bit of, but for the purposes of filming, obviously, I want to make sure you can see. So I'm just mixing up a dark there with my little rigger brush. And see, I'm resting my, you probably can't see that, but my little pinky, I just rested against the canvas there. And then that gives me a little bit more stability. Now what I might do is just put in a very subtle hint of some shadows under these people. Now I'm just going all dark with these people. Clearly there's going to be some of them, and the reason why I put them all far away is I don't want to have to put any details into them, right? You feel free to, if you want. The photos do have a couple of people who are a bit closer, but the ones that are a bit closer, you know, maybe I'll just put a little touch of colour into them. Give a little bit of yellow perhaps. But the ones further away, you know, I wouldn't bother. But maybe this lady here is wearing a yellow dress. Okay, and I always feel like, well, maybe we'll just get a little touch of lighter tone. So using that ocean colour, I put in some cadmium yellow, and I'm just thinking that perhaps we could get just a slight little bit of light happening up on top here. But I've just got to be careful that it's not too bright, which it is. So I'll come back to that darker tone and we'll put that light into that darker tone. And let's just try some of that. That's probably a little bit better. A little bit more colour harmony there. Now this isn't in the, it's quite hard to see any sort of shifts in light in the photo. There's a little bit, but not much. But just to break up this headline and make it slightly more interesting. And just need to soften all that in, of course. Come back to that dark. So I don't want to lose all those darks in there by putting too much highlight in there. And I'll just pop in a couple of little shapes in here. These are going to be pretty small, obviously. But I tell you, up on that headland there, they have these sea eagles. And I've seen them fly along this beach. And they're quite a large bird. I live up in the top here. I've seen them fly along the beach there. Giant fish in their clutches, taking it back to their nest. Maybe they're chicks, I don't know. If you're going to put little whites in for the seagulls, then obviously you need to put them against the darks. Alright, well I think that's pretty much all we would do. I mean, one little addition you could do is put in a little misty tone along there because it's sort of showing in the photo. But I'd kind of wait until it dries off before I do that. So we won't do that today, but that's something you could explore with it. And just put a little bit of red there. And pop a little signature on it. Well, there we go, folks. There's our little painting this week of Sunshine Beach near Noosa in Queensland. A fun little painting to do, really simple. We've kept this so simple that basically even if you've never painted before, you can definitely have a go with this, just following along with the steps. Remember, we started off 4 big shapes: the headland, the sand, the water and the sky. And then we just, during our blocking, we started out a little bit of detail, but we made sure we got our values right, our darkest dark and our lightest lights, right? That's really important. And then we just, in step 3 here, we've just added in just the slightest little bit of detail, not too much, enough to bring the painting to a, more of a finished state. Now keep in mind, what I'm doing here is just a little demo. You can take a lot longer with yours and be more precise and create a more finished painting. And I would love to see it. So make sure you come and drop by our Facebook group and post it up in the Facebook group. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you haven't done so already, please go and register for the free course that we give you at the Learn to Paint Academy. In the free course, we go through the More method of painting in more detail. And there's 4 different painting demonstrations there for you to have a go at. So all you need to do, I'll pop the web address underneath me here, but if you just go to the Learn to Paint Academy and click on the free course, or go to www.learntopaint.info. You need to register, but once you're registered, you'll have full access. See you next week on the Learn to Paint TV show, and happy painting. Cheers.